Hey, welcome back to the second part of 2.1. We're going to look at how to draw a histogram. A histogram is just a glorified bar chart. So basically, we're going to graph these frequency heights right here. We're going to graph those as bars on a chart. There's just a couple rules on how to label a histogram accurately. So we'll go through those, but that's kind of the big picture of where we're going. So the first thing you want to do is kind of draw your graph. We're going to go like this, like this. Your classes are going to be down here, and your frequency is going to be how high the bar is. All right, so the first thing is labeling your axis. If your frequencies are very large numbers, like say you've got 25 data points in one of your classes, then you definitely don't want to label by ones, okay? If your max number is 5 in a frequency, then you probably do want to label by ones. So again, how you label is your choice, but you need to mark it out so the person reading it understands. So I'm going to, just because of space, because my graph is not 11 bars high, I'm going to label by 2s. So my first marker here is going to be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Okay, and then my odd numbers will just be halfway between those, which is great. And then the second thing is, if your class, this is your lower class boundary, that's your lower, the low end of your class. If that is not 0, then you need to put a break in your graph. So the reader understands that I'm shifting this graph over and we're just looking at where the data is. If you don't do that, it can lead to a misleading graph. You can make people think something that's not actually there. We'll talk about that a little bit more next section. So since I start at 12, I'm going to signify that there's a break in the data. And the way we do that is we put this little squiggly line right there. And that tells the reader, no, hey, this graph's been shifted over. Okay. You can also do that in the frequency. We don't typically do that in this class, but sometimes you'll see graphs with a little break. So if I'm not starting at 0 again and counting up, if I'm just starting at like 300, say, and graphing the top part of the frequency bars, I have to put a break and let people know that. So the first bar is going to be 11 high. Whatever your frequency is how high the bar is. So I'm going to draw that one right here. My next one is going to be 4 high. My next one is going to be 3 high. And if you have a frequency that's 0, you just leave that bar blank. Okay, you skip a space, so you'll have an empty segment in there. The next one is 1. And then the next one is 2. So make sure you've got 5 bars, 5 classes. Okay, and now let's talk about how to label the classes. There's 2 ways. One is using class boundaries. So the class boundaries are going to be 0.5 on either direction of the class width. So let's take our first class, for example. I've got a 12 to 21. Okay, let me draw a little number line here. 12 is to 21. This is my class width. And the numbers on either side of this are 11 and 22, if I'm thinking on a number line. So what you want to do is take your class width and you want to go 0.5 less than that and 0.5 more than that. Those are your class boundaries. Now, why do we do that? Because these bars touch, we have to find a point in the middle that the classes share. So if you see this, this class goes from 12 to 21, and then this one's 22 to 31. So between this 21 and 22 bar, see, that's this guy ends at 21 and this one starts at 22. What they share in the middle is 21.5. So that's why we do that, so that they actually touch each other. That's kind of like their shared point, if you will, like we're backing off from both ends of those classes. So the class boundaries are going to be 11.5 and 21.5. So that's how I'm going to label my first bar, 11.5 and 21.5 right there. Okay, now I'm going to do it with the next class. So the next class is 22 to 31. So I'm taking 22 and 31 and I'm backing off 0.5 in either direction. So I'm going 21.5 and 31.5. Okay, well, 21.5 is already there. Good, that matches. My next one's 31.5. Next class. Next class is 32 to 41. So I'm going 31.5 to 41.5. Okay, and you get the pattern. The next one's going to be 51.5 and 61.5. That's how you label with class boundaries, and that's what those are. If your homework asks you about class boundaries, that's what you're doing, the 0.5 in either direction. The other way to label your classes is with midpoints. You remember how we've talked about averages before. The way you average two numbers is you add them up and you divide by 2. So what the midpoints do is they take the class minimum and the class maximum. So they're taking this value and this value, and they're finding the middle. They're finding the average. So what you're going to do for a class midpoint is go 12 plus 21 divide by 2. Okay, so if we do that, 12 plus 21 divided by 2, this is going to be 16.5. This is my midpoint for my first class. So that's how you're going to label it. So if you choose not to, now you're choosing one or the other, either class boundaries or midpoints. So I'm going to erase my class boundaries. This is option 2. We're going to use midpoints. Now, they're midpoints, so you've got to mark them in the middle of the bar. So this middle point right there is going to be 16.5. Then I do the next class. I'm going to find the average there. My next class is 22 to 31. So I'm going to go 22 plus 31 divided by 2 is 26.5. Okay, and so that's the middle of the next class. Now, the other thing that maybe you'll notice, and probably for sure if I do one more bar here, is that the distance between these two values is the class width. So another way to do this is find your first midpoint and then just add the class width to each term, to each number, to get the next one. And if you remember from our previous video, the class width is 10. So I'm just basically adding 10 to each. So this is going to be 36.5, 46.5, and 56.5. But where those numbers are coming from is I'm just averaging the min and the max in each class and dividing by 2. So finding the middle point. And that's your histogram. So things that you need to remember. The first is that you need to label your frequency. So that's these numbers on the vertical axis. You need to put a break if class 1 doesn't start at 0, which usually it doesn't. So that's this piece right there. Third thing is you need to make your bars touch. In a histogram, because of how we're labeling this, the bars touch, they share a line. And then the fourth is use class boundaries or midpoints to label your classes. And that's these values, either midpoints or boundaries. So those are the things that we're looking for a histogram to be labeled accurately. And that's all. I will see you next time. Have a great day.